He fired me 3 months before my pension kicked in. 5 years later, I bought his company and fired him on his grandson's birthday. You think you know how corporate America works? You think loyalty means something? Let me tell you what really happens when you dedicate 27 years of your life to a company, only to discover that to them, you're just another expense to cut. My name is David, and this is the story of how I went from being discarded like yesterday's newspaper to owning the very empire that tried to destroy me. But more importantly, this is about justice, the kind that takes years to serve but tastes sweeter than anything you can imagine. It was a Tuesday morning in March when my world collapsed. I remember because I had just finished my coffee, the same Brazilian blend I'd been drinking for 15 years, when Marcus Wellington called me into his corner office. Marcus, even his name sounded like money and privilege. He was the kind of guy who wore Italian suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent, drove a Tesla because it was trendy, and had never worked a day of real labor in his perfectly manicured life. The company, Wellington Dynamics, was his father's creation, but Marcus had inherited it, like he inherited everything else, without earning it. For 27 years, I had been the backbone of their operations department. I knew every client, every process, every shortcut that kept the company running smoothly. When new employees started, they came to me, not Marcus. When clients had problems, they asked for me by name. But apparently none of that mattered. David, Marcus said, not even looking up from his laptop, we're restructuring the operations department. Your position is being eliminated. Just like that. 27 years reduced to one sentence. No warning, no discussion, no acknowledgement of what I had given to that company. I sat there stunned, waiting for him to continue, to explain, to show some hint of human decency. He finally looked up, and I'll never forget his expression. It wasn't apologetic or even uncomfortable. It was bored, like he was discussing the weather. We've prepared a severance package, he continued, sliding a folder across his mahogany desk. 2 weeks' pay, and of course, we'll transition your health insurance for 30 days. 2 weeks' pay for 27 years. And here's the kicker. I was exactly 93 days away from full pension benefits. 27 years, and I would walk away with nothing but a measly 2 weeks severance because I was 3 months short of the magical 30-year mark. Marcus, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I'm 3 months away from full pension. Surely we can work something out. I can take a pay cut, move to a different department. He shook his head, already turning back to his laptop. The decision is final, David. HR will handle the details. Please clean out your desk by end of business today. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a business decision. This was deliberate. Fire me before the pension kicks in. Save the company hundreds of thousands in retirement benefits. It was calculated, cold, and perfectly legal. I walked out of that office in a daze. 27 years of my life, and I was being escorted out like a common criminal. My colleagues couldn't even look at me. They knew it could be them next. But here's what Marcus Wellington didn't know about me. He saw an aging operations manager, someone past his prime, dead weight to be cut. What he didn't see was a man who had been quietly building something on the side for 15 years. You see, while I was making Marcus rich, I had been developing software solutions in my spare time. Nothing fancy, just practical tools that solved real business problems. I had a small client base, mostly local businesses who needed simple, effective systems without the corporate bloat and ridiculous price tags. The day I got fired, I made a decision. I wasn't going to slink away into early retirement. I wasn't going to let Marcus Wellington win. I was going to build something that would make him regret the day he underestimated me. The first year was brutal. I lived off my meager savings and worked 18-hour days from my basement office. My wife, Sarah, thought I had lost my mind. "David," she would say, "you're 62 years old. Maybe it's time to slow down, find something part-time, enjoy life." But I couldn't let it go. Every night I thought about Marcus sitting in his corner office, probably congratulating himself on cutting costs by getting rid of the old guy. Every morning, I woke up with more determination to prove him wrong. My software company, Phoenix Solutions, started small. The name wasn't subtle. I was rising from the ashes of my corporate death. My first major client was a mid-sized manufacturing company that had been frustrated with their current systems provider. Sound familiar? It was one of Wellington Dynamics' biggest accounts. I didn't steal them. I didn't have to. I simply offered them a better solution at half the price, with customer service that actually cared about solving their problems. Within 6 months, they had switched to Phoenix Solutions, and they brought 3 of their sister companies with them. Word spread quickly in the business community. The guy who used to run operations at Wellington had started his own company, and he was delivering results that the big firms couldn't match. My client base grew from 5 companies to 50, then to 500. By year 2, Phoenix Solutions was generating more revenue than I had ever imagined possible. But I wasn't content with just success. I had a specific goal in mind, and I was patient enough to wait for the right moment. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on Wellington Dynamics. It wasn't hard. The business community is smaller than you think, and people talk. What I learned was fascinating and infuriating in equal measure. After I left, the operations department fell apart. My replacement, a young MBA with no real-world experience, had managed to lose 3 major clients within his first year. Employee morale was at an all-time low, and several key people had jumped ship to competitors. But Marcus seemed oblivious to the problems. He was too busy playing golf and attending charity galas to notice that his company was slowly bleeding out. His father's legacy was crumbling, and he didn't even see it happening. By year 3, I had expanded Phoenix Solutions into a full-service business consulting firm. We offered everything from software development to operational efficiency consulting to business process optimization. We were directly competing with Wellington Dynamics in almost every sector. And we were winning. The irony wasn't lost on me. The skills I had developed during my 27 years at Wellington were now being used to outcompete them at every turn. I knew their weaknesses because I had lived with them for decades. I knew what clients really wanted because I had been the one actually serving them while Marcus collected the profits. Year 4 was when things got interesting. Wellington Dynamics was in serious trouble. They had lost nearly 40% of their client base, mostly to smaller, more agile firms like mine. Their overhead was killing them. All those fancy offices, expensive cars, and bloated executive salaries were becoming impossible to justify. I heard through the grapevine that Marcus was looking for buyers. The family business that his father had built was going to be sold to the highest bidder. Marcus would walk away with millions, while the employees who had dedicated their careers to the company would likely lose their jobs in the inevitable restructuring. That's when I made my move. Through a series of shell companies and legal maneuvers that would make your head spin, I began acquiring Wellington Dynamics stock. Not enough to trigger disclosure requirements, but enough to have influence when the time came. I also started reaching out to potential investors, people who knew me from my Phoenix Solutions success, and who were looking for opportunities in the consulting space. I painted a picture of a distressed asset that could be turned around with the right leadership and operational expertise. The beauty of it was that Marcus had no idea what was happening. He was so focused on finding a buyer who would pay top dollar for his struggling company that he never bothered to investigate who was actually making the offers. By the beginning of year 5, I had assembled an investment group with enough capital to make a serious bid for Wellington Dynamics. But I didn't want to just buy the company. I wanted to buy it for less than it was worth, and I wanted Marcus to know exactly who was taking it from him. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Wellington Dynamics had a particularly bad quarter, losing 2 of their remaining major clients to competitors. Their cash flow was in serious trouble, and Marcus was getting desperate. That's when my investment group made our offer. It was fair. Not generous, but fair. About 60% of what the company had been worth 5 years earlier when I was fired. Marcus tried to negotiate, tried to find other buyers, but the market had spoken. Wellington Dynamics was a failing company with outdated systems, poor management, and a reputation for losing clients. The only reason we were willing to pay anything at all was because of the underlying assets and the potential for a complete operational overhaul. The closing was scheduled for a Friday in October. I had been looking forward to this moment for 5 years, but I wanted to make it special. I wanted Marcus to understand exactly what had happened and why. But first, I needed to do some research. I wanted to know everything about Marcus's personal life, his family, his schedule. Not for anything malicious, you understand. I just wanted to time things perfectly. That's when I discovered something that made my blood boil all over again. Through a contact who worked in Wellington's HR department, I learned the truth about my firing. It hadn't been a simple cost-cutting measure or a restructuring decision. Marcus had specifically targeted me because he was afraid I knew too much about his incompetence. Apparently, several clients had been complaining about Marcus's lack of involvement and expertise. They had been asking to work directly with me instead of going through him. Marcus saw this as a threat to his authority and decided to eliminate the problem by eliminating me. But here's the part that really got to me. He had planned it for months. He had deliberately waited until I was close to pension eligibility, not to save money, but to send a message. He wanted me to know that no matter how valuable I was to the company, he had the power to destroy my future whenever he chose. It was personal. It had always been personal. That's when I decided that my revenge needed to be personal, too. I learned that Marcus's grandson was turning 6 on the day after our closing. There was going to be a big family party, and Marcus was particularly excited about it because the boy was his only grandchild, and they were very close. Perfect. The closing went smoothly. My lawyers handled most of the details while I sat quietly in the conference room, watching Marcus sign away his father's legacy. He looked tired, defeated, but also relieved. He probably thought he was getting out before things got worse. When it was over, he actually shook my hand. "Good luck with the company, David. I hope you can do better with it than I did." I smiled and said, "Oh, I plan to do much better, Marcus. Much better." He looked confused for a moment, like he was trying to place where he knew me from, but then he shrugged and walked away. After 5 years, he had completely forgotten the man whose life he had tried to destroy. But I hadn't forgotten him. The next morning, Saturday, I drove to the Wellington Dynamics headquarters. I had my own keys now, my own access codes, my own parking space. The building that had once represented my professional prison was now my kingdom. I walked through the empty halls, remembering all the years I had spent there, all the late nights, all the weekends I had sacrificed for a company that saw me as disposable. But those memories didn't make me sad anymore. They made me determined. I went to Marcus's old corner office, the same one where he had fired me 5 years earlier. I sat in his chair, put my feet up on his mahogany desk, and made a phone call. "Marcus, this is David Chin, the new owner of Wellington Dynamics. I need you to come in today for a brief meeting." There was a long pause. David Chen? Do I know you? We met yesterday at the closing, but we actually have a much longer history than that. I need about 10 minutes of your time. It's Saturday, he protested. It's my grandson's birthday party. I understand, and I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Let's say, 30 minutes. I promise it won't take long. He agreed, probably thinking it was some standard post-sale formality that needed to be handled quickly. While I waited for him to arrive, I prepared my office. I put my old employee photo on the desk, the one from the company directory that had been taken just 6 months before I was fired. I also printed out copies of all the financial documents showing Phoenix Solutions' growth over the past 5 years, and a detailed analysis of how Wellington Dynamics had declined during that same period. But the most important thing I prepared was Marcus's termination letter. When he arrived, he looked exactly the same as he had 5 years earlier. Maybe a little grayer, maybe a little more tired, but still carrying himself with that same entitled arrogance that had made him so insufferable. He walked into the office like he still owned it, which I suppose old habits die hard. So, David, what can I help you with? I really do need to get to my grandson's party. I gestured for him to sit in the chair across from the desk, and the same chair I had sat in when he fired me. I wanted to talk to you about the future of Wellington Dynamics under new ownership, I began. But first, I thought you might want to know a little more about who I am. I slid the old employee photo across the desk. He picked it up, studied it for a moment, and I watched as recognition slowly dawned on his face. His expression changed from polite interest to confusion to something approaching horror. You worked here, in operations. For 27 years, I said, until you fired me. 3 months before my pension would have kicked in. On a Tuesday morning in March, 5 years ago. He stared at the photo, then at me, then back at the photo. I don't understand. How did I go from being your discarded employee to being your boss? I leaned back in the chair that used to be his. That's a very interesting story, Marcus. Would you like to hear it? For the next 20 minutes, I told him everything. How I had built Phoenix Solutions from nothing. How I had systematically outcompeted his company. How I had assembled the investment group that bought Wellington Dynamics for a fraction of its former value. I showed him the financial documents, the client lists, the revenue projections. I explained how every skill I had developed during my 27 years at his company had been turned against him. You created your own worst enemy, I told him. When you fired me, you didn't just lose an employee. You created a competitor who knew all your weaknesses and had every reason to exploit them. He sat in stunned silence, trying to process what I was telling him. But here's the part I really want you to understand, I continued. This wasn't just business. You made it personal when you deliberately timed my firing to cost me my pension. You made it personal when you did it not because the company needed to cut costs, but because you felt threatened by my competence. I slid another document across the desk. The HR records I had obtained that detailed his real reasons for firing me. You were afraid that clients preferred working with me instead of you. You were afraid that people would realize you had inherited your position instead of earning it. So you decided to destroy my career to protect your ego. His face had gone pale. David, if I made a mistake... Oh, you made a mistake, Marcus. You made the biggest mistake of your professional life. You underestimated me. I opened the final folder on my desk and pulled out his termination letter. Which brings us to why you're really here, I said. You see, I'm restructuring the company. There are going to be some significant changes in management. I slid the letter across the desk. "Your position is being eliminated." He picked up the letter with shaking hands and read it. It was almost word for word identical to the letter he had given me 5 years earlier, with one exception. His severance package was exactly what mine had been: 2 weeks' pay. "You can't be serious," he whispered. "Oh, I'm completely serious, just like you were 5 years ago." I stood up and walked around the desk. "The decision is final, Marcus. HR will handle the details. Please clean out your desk by end of business today." He looked up at me with an expression I recognized, and the same stunned disbelief I had felt when he fired me. "But David, this is my family's company. My father built this place." "Your father built it," I agreed. "And you destroyed it. You ran it into the ground with your incompetence and arrogance. The only reason it's worth saving at all is because of people like me, people who actually understood how to serve clients and deliver results." I walked to the door and opened it. "Oh, and Marcus, I know today is your grandson's birthday party. I am sure you don't want to be late. But I thought you should know. This termination is effective immediately. Security will escort you out, just like they did with me." He stood up slowly, still holding the termination letter. "How can you do this, after everything we've been through?" "Everything we've been through?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Marcus, you threw me away like garbage when I was 3 months from retirement. You cost me hundreds of thousands in pension benefits because your ego couldn't handle the fact that I was better at my job than you were at yours." I stepped aside so he could walk past me. "Now you know how it feels. Now you know what it's like to have your future destroyed by someone who has the power to do it, and no conscience about using that power." He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "What happens now? To the company, I mean." "Now I fix everything you broke," I said. "I bring back the clients you lost. I rebuild the reputation you destroyed, and I turn this company into what it should have been all along. Everything you could have done, but were too lazy and entitled to actually do." He nodded slowly and walked out. I watched from the window as security escorted him to his car. He sat in the parking lot for a long time, probably trying to figure out how to explain to his family that the company his grandfather had built now belonged to the man he had tried to destroy. But I wasn't done yet. Over the next 6 months, I completely transformed Wellington Dynamics. I brought in my team from Phoenix Solutions, implemented the systems and processes that had made us successful, and began the slow work of rebuilding relationships with former clients. The turnaround was faster than anyone expected. Within a year, we had not only recovered all the clients that Marcus had lost, but had expanded into new markets and increased revenue by 40%. But the real satisfaction came from smaller moments. Like when I hired back 3 of the employees who had been laid off during Marcus's reign of incompetence. Or when I established a pension plan that guaranteed full benefits after 25 years instead of 30. Or when I set up a scholarship fund for employees' children, something Marcus had always claimed the company couldn't afford. I also made sure that everyone in the industry knew the story, not in a vindictive way, but as a business case study. How a company that had been built on solid principles had been nearly destroyed by poor leadership, and how it had been saved by someone who understood its real value. The business community ate it up. I was invited to speak at conferences, written up in industry publications, featured in business school case studies. The story of David Chen and Wellington Dynamics became legendary in consulting circles. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came 2 years after I fired Marcus. I was at an industry conference when I ran into him. He was working for a small consulting firm, making a fraction of what he used to earn, trying to rebuild his reputation from scratch. He saw me across the room and actually walked over. "David," he said, extending his hand. "Congratulations on your success with Wellington. I've been reading about it." I shook his hand. "Thank you, Marcus. How are you doing?" "I'm learning," he said. "Learning what it's like to actually work for a living instead of just inheriting success." There was something different about him. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been humility. "I owe you an apology," he continued. "What I did to you was wrong. I was threatened by your competence, and I handled it in the worst possible way. I cost you years of your life, and I cost my family a company that had been built over generations." I studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity, but I didn't find any. "I appreciate that, Marcus, but you should know I don't regret any of it. Getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to discover what I was really capable of." He smiled sadly. "My father always said that adversity reveals character. I guess we both learned something about ours." We talked for a few more minutes, and then he walked away. I watched him go, and for the first time in 7 years, I didn't feel anger when I looked at him. I felt something closer to pity. Marcus Wellington had been born with every advantage: money, connections, a successful family business handed to him on a silver platter. But he had never learned how to earn anything, how to fight for anything, how to build anything from nothing. When he destroyed my comfortable corporate life, he had inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible: the motivation to discover my own strength. I built an empire from the ashes of my corporate death. I created jobs, served clients, and built something meaningful that would outlast me. I proved that competence and determination could triumph over privilege and entitlement. But most importantly, I learned that the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about building something so successful, so impressive, so undeniably valuable that your enemies have no choice but to respect what you've accomplished. Marcus Wellington fired me because he was afraid I was better than him. 7 years later, I had proved beyond any doubt that I was. And that was worth more than any pension could ever have been. Today, Wellington Dynamics is one of the most successful consulting firms in the region. We employ over 200 people, serve clients across 3 states, and generate more revenue than Marcus ever dreamed possible. But I still keep that old employee photo on my desk, not as a reminder of what was done to me, but as a reminder of what I was capable of doing in response. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't about getting even. It's about getting so far ahead that your former opponent can't even see you anymore. The company that fired me now bears my vision, operates by my principles, and succeeds because of systems I designed. Every day, in ways both large and small, I am rewriting the legacy of Wellington Dynamics. Marcus Wellington tried to erase me from the story. Instead, he ensured that I would become the most important chapter. And that, my friends, is what real justice looks like. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated or discarded by someone who should have valued you, share your experience in the comments below. Sometimes the best revenge is simply proving them wrong by becoming everything they said you couldn't be. Subscribe for more stories of triumph over adversity.